I'm Jay Sekulow. I'm going to serve as the moderator. I'm the Chief Counsel of the European Center for Law and Justice and the American Center for Law and Justice, and I actually spend most of my time litigating at the U.S. Supreme Court. But I also do a lot of work at the international courts, including the European Court of Human Rights and the international courts. I've had the privilege of working with Malcolm Hoenlein on a major project going on right now on some of the international matters, and of course work with Brooke Goldstein in putting this together. She's done a great job of organizing this conference. We've got a really great panel with really great discussions. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then I'm going to make some very quick comments, and then we're going to get right into this discussion because I think the topic is critical. To my left is Ann Herzberg. Ann, I've gotten to know over the last couple of years because of her work as counsel to the NGO Monitor. It's a fantastic organization. They've got material, by the way, in the lunch area where we were. Ann served as, she was a graduate of Columbia University Law School. She worked for the law firms of Sherman and Sterling as well as Winston and Strawn. I know her from her work at NGO Monitor, where she's done tremendous legal analysis on issues of international law, especially affecting Israel. She's also performed work for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, and she's published extensively on these issues. And as I said, they have a great deal of information available out in the lunch area. Richard Heinemann is a graduate of the University of Michigan Law School and National Law Center of George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He's completed the American University Law and Policy Institute abroad at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Israel, where he studied legal aspects of the Middle East conflict and comparative law. He also served as a senior counsel for his law firm of Heinemann, Noodleman and Kalick, with offices both in Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv. The firm concentrates in a practice area not only of corporate development and corporate development matters, but also represents major corporations. But for the purposes of this conference, he's also served as lead counsel in pending litigation on behalf of terror victims and injured consumers. In 1985, he served as the NGO delegate to the United Nations World Conference on Women in Nairobi, Kenya. Ephraim Kalamish is the international investment law scholar. He also serves as a United Nations representative of the International Association of Jewish Lawyers at New York University. He's currently working on a global regulation of sovereign wealth funds and financial markets. He has a doctorate in international economics from the University of Michigan. He's focused on the future of bilateral investment treaties and has also done significant consulting with Israel and advises, in fact, the Israeli government. Joshua Rosenberg is the British-based commentator on the law with particular interest in constitutional reform. He earned a law degree at Oxford, where he trains as a solicitor. He holds honorary doctorate degrees from the University of Hertfordshire and is an honorary bencher of Gray's Inn. His books include Trial of Strength, which examined the tensions between ministers and judges under the last conservative government, The Search for Justice, An Anatomy of the Law in the mid-1990s, and The Case for the Crown, which chartered the launch of the Crown Prosecution Service. He's one of the most respected journalists in the UK and is also sought after for his legal commentary. I want to just spend a few moments discussing this topic, then I'm going to turn it right over to our panelists because we've got such a great panel here. My work in this area started when the International Criminal Court initially filed with them a statement of jurisdiction from the Palestinian Authority on the conflict over Operation Cast Lead. There was allegations of potential war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so forth. I actually was in Israel during Cast Lead and was in Sderot and Ashkelon when rockets were coming into the cities, and when the conflict developed into the utilization of the legal system, lawfare, to engage this new asymmetrical war, we got heavily engaged. Our offices, we have an office in Jerusalem, a large office in Washington, D.C., and our office in New York as well. All three of those offices went to work on this project, and it culminated in filing with a group of well-known European lawyers, one of which you're going to hear from in the next panel. You already heard from this morning, François-Henri Briard, one of the most respected constitutional French Supreme Court lawyers in France, one of the most respected European lawyers. The legal team also included John Ashcroft, the former Attorney General of the United States, Hans Christian Kruger, who was the former Adjunct General for the Council of Europe, and other very well-known military lawyers from around the globe. We filed a statement opposing the jurisdictional request of the Palestinian Authority. That culminated in a series of briefs, including responses to Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and others, more coming because the issues, and there has been a change of tone coming out of the prosecutor's office over the last several months, which we're actually very encouraged about. And then, of course, the Goldstone report was placed on everyone. And the Goldstone report, we filed a rather comprehensive response. Brett Josby and Sam Nunberg from our office here were the primary architects of this, as well as some of our military lawyers in our office in Virginia. But I wanted to take one section very quickly to show you the bias. I'm a litigator by training, so I'm always looking at evidentiary bias that exists. And here's the evidentiary bias that exists. Judge Goldstone, who is, of course, a well-known, very well-respected South African jurist, wrote a letter, and it said this to the UN Secretary, that there is an important case to be made for an international investigation of gross violations of the law of war, and that the events in Gaza have shocked us to the core. Of course, he's talking about Israel. Later, he becomes the head of the Goldstone Commission. This statement, of course, was prior to his appointment. Interestingly, Human Rights Watch, their president and founder, actually, was president up until just a few years ago, Robert Bernstein. Here's what he said, and we put this in our brief, about the reports that have been coming out and about Human Rights Watch report, because they were part of this Goldstone analysis and also a separate filing. Here's what he said. Now, this is the founder of Human Rights Watch. This is not my guys writing our position on this. This is the founder of Human Rights Watch. Here's what he wrote. As the founder of Human Rights Watch, its active chairman for 20 years, and now founding chairman emeritus, I must do something that I never anticipated. I must publicly join the critics Human Rights Watch has had, as its original mission was to pry open, closed societies, advocate basic freedoms, and support dissenters. But recently, it has been issuing reports on the Israeli-Arab conflict that are helping those who wish to turn Israel into a pariah state. Now, this is the head of Human Rights Watch, former head and founder. Nowhere is this more evident than in its work in the Middle East. The region is populated by authoritarian regimes with appalling human rights records. Yet in recent years, Human Rights Watch has written far more condemnations of Israel for violations of international law than of any other country in the region. Human Rights Watch has lost critical perspective on a conflict in which Israel has been repeatedly attacked by Hamas and Hezbollah, organizations that go after Israeli citizens and use their own people as human shields. This is coming from Human Rights Watch's founder. This talks about lawfare being utilized as a weapon. We have to utilize the legal system as well and respond. That's a big part of this. You can't just sit back and, as they're utilizing the legal system, say, we're going to do nothing. We're not going to respond to this. I think it's an obligation for international human rights lawyers, for national security lawyers, for NGOs to respond. Another professor on the list of the Goldstone report fact-finding, this is supposed to be the independent fact-finding, Professor Kristen Chinkin's article. She's a professor of international law at the London School of Economics. Her article is entitled, again, before her appointment to the commission, Israel's bombardment of Gaza is not self-defense, it's a war crime. These are the people that are determining 7 months later whether there's been a violation of international law. That's the statements they're making. I could go on and on with the list. You're getting the drift of this. When asked about the professor's statements, Judge Goldstone said, well, you know, firstly, it's not a judicial inquiry. It's a fact-finding mission. He's known the professor for many years. He found her to be intelligent, sensible, and he's absolutely satisfied that she has a completely open mind and will not exhibit any bias. This was the same person that wrote, Israel's bombardment of Gaza is not self-defense, it's a war crime. This is the textbook example of lawfare. This is the problem with the entire system. Another professor that's on the committee, the fact-finding committee, Hina Jalani. She also served as a senior activist for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. She was giving them legal advice. This is the fact-finding group. These are the people they're utilizing to do the, when we think of fact-finding, what do we think of? We think of neutral arbitrators that are going to go in and investigate fact and make conclusions and recommendations. That's not what's happened in the Goldstone report. But the Goldstone report's gotten a lot of publicity globally, and it's put Israel in very bad light. There's responses coming in, fortunately, not just ours, others. But the fact of the matter is, and I think we have to be really aware of this, this is a fight for the survival of Western civilization.